Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Ryan. Today, it's time, now that we have a seventh operation in the mix, I think it's time that we do a tier list here and say which ones are the best, which ones are the worst, at least in my opinion. Now, again, as all tier lists go, you and I will most likely, chances are really good, we're not going to see things exactly the same. So that's totally fine. And if you disagree with something, please let me know in the comments why, because that always makes for really good discussions. But here we go. We're just going to go right down the list here, starting with Inferno, followed by Decapitation. After that, we have Vox Liberatis. After that, we have Reliquary. Fifth is Fall of Atreus. Sorry, I'm going off of memory here. 6 is Ballistic Engine. And finally, 7 is the brand new Termination. And so with that, let's get cranking here. So the very first operation here, obviously Inferno. This is the one that I want to see the numbers on it. I really would love to see the numbers on, percentages of what operations are being run the most. I have a pretty strong suspicion that Inferno is in the lead by a landslide. I would be willing to guess that Inferno's probably a 15 to 20% gap between it and the second most played operation in the game would be my guess. But I would love to see the raw numbers here. But this is the one that if you're randomly queuing, more people are running this one than any others, because when you're talking about random queuing, this is the one that most people know the best, right? The teammates that you get are most likely going to be able to understand where to go, where the gene seeds are, where the armory data spawns are, what to do in certain instances, when to run to generators to defend them, all that stuff. We all know it by this point. So that being said, is it, the best operation, even though it is the most run? And that's a fair question to ask. I think that for me and my money, as basic as it's going to sound, I think that Inferno is going to have to end up either at the top of A tier or at the bottom of S tier, one of the two. But what's the final verdict here? I think for me, I'm going to end up putting Inferno at the top of A tier. Okay, let me talk about why. S tier is reserved for things that are exceptional. They are above and beyond, right? It's not just that it's phenomenal, it's a step above that. And it says this one stands out against the backdrop of all the others for specific criteria. So for me, I'm looking for things like dynamic changes in the map environment. I'm looking for an exciting finale. And Inferno to me is sort of, there's absolutely nothing wrong with Inferno. It's great, it's fun. But it is, at least for me, a little bit on the monotonous side, because here's what you have. The first phase of Inferno is getting from the starting point to the Cadian outpost, right? And in between that space, you're probably gonna fight a few waves, and you're also going to fight maybe a terminus, right? You might get the zoanthrope to spawn, the neurothrope. You might get the neurothrope to spawn, you might get the carnifex to spawn there. If you don't, you're just fighting waves of Tyranid, and that's it. You get then to the Cadian outpost, and you're running around searching dead bodies for, the codes that you need. And during that time, you're probably going to face a wave. And then you move on to the next phase, which is the sort of raw fields of Promethium. Is that what it's called? Promethium fields? And in that phase, you're probably going to fight a wave or two and maybe a terminus, right? The neurothrope or the carnifex can spawn there. Then after that point, you're going to move into the first thing that really breaks the mold is the generator defense stage. And then you're sort of internal inside of this this mining facility. So you do get a landscape change here, which I think gives it several points. But again, you're fighting waves of Tyranid. You do have a little bit of a landscape change, which I do appreciate, but then the finale is just you're back outdoors and you're holding your ground against waves. And so I do appreciate that this one feels the most like a horde mode of any of the operations, right? This one sort of feels the closest to a proper horde mode than any of the others. And for that reason, I do really like it. Obviously, to say something is A tier is to say that it's extremely good. It rises to the top. Nobody comes home, and shows their parents an A on a report card and gets chewed out for it because it's not good enough, right? At least not a good parent. But anyways, so I think it's top of A tier. The only thing I think that would really elevate it is if it had a phase where it really broke the monotony of fighting Tyranid waves. As fun as that is, I would like to have a more engaging finale that's not just hold off a wave that comes from the ground, hold off a wave that comes from the sides, and then hold off another wave that comes from the ground. If we had something a little more dynamic there, I think that would bump it up into S tier. So for me, Inferno, top of A tier. We're moving on to Decapitation, baby. Okay, Decapitation. Obviously, this is the one where we are taking down the Hive Tyrant. For me, the thing that this one has going for it the most is the change of scenery, right? As we're progressing through the streets and these buildings, and you know, it's not the same palette all the way from start to finish, right? Sometimes you're indoors, sometimes you're outdoors in these more open areas, and so you get this great variance, right? And even the stage where you have to plant the bombs can end up being a very vertical fight because you're starting to dip into having to go downstairs or upstairs. And sometimes you get separated from your team, and it introduces that team dynamic of traveling together even when you're moving on different planes vertically. And I like verticality in my maps as well because I think that really breaks up the monotony of just the horizontal look at where I'm going and go over there and shoot the thing. So I like a lot about Decapitation, especially the final sort of stage where you are moving through those buildings and on your way to the finale, and you're in these sort of tighter quarters. It gets dark and dingy and feels, you know, like that real Warhammer vibe, right? The dark, grim, dark future sort of feels embodied there. And of course, I really like the Hive Tyrant fight, quite honestly, especially when they started introducing every now and then. I don't sound off in the comments if you've had this happen to you. But in a recent patch, they made it so that you can get no Tyranid combatants in the Hive Tyrant finale, right? Normally you get 2 waves that come at about the 50% health checkpoint on both of his 2 phases, but it's possible to get nothing except only the green spores. This caught me off guard the first time because I didn't know it was a thing, right? We're just dealing with the Hive Tyrant. I turn around and there is an ocean of green spores in my face. And they downed all of us. I just wasn't ready for it. One of us had to bake a Guardian relic and get up and save the day. But anyways, it kept us on our toes. But I really love the Hive Tyrant fight. I think it's a well-balanced fight, especially now after a couple of patches. And there's, you know, they took out the ways of really just cooking his HP rapidly with things like cracks and meltas. And now you have to be a little bit more strategic about it. But to play an assault, if you're an assault main, you probably love the Hive Tyrant fight because perfect dodges and gun strikes make that fight so fun and dynamic. So I'm actually going to end up putting this in the A tier, just behind Inferno. Okay. It is really fun. It is really dynamic. The only things I think would push this up into the S tier is something that really breaks the mold to make it exceptional. The one thing I think is the best quality about this is the Hive Tyrant fight itself, because it's a boss fight that you actually get to use your weapons on, right? You know, we have other boss fights in this game where you don't really, I mean, you have Reliquary, but it's just that, to me, that fight is really boring because the Helldrake just sits there. It's like, oh, I get to fight a dragon. Is it flying around and swooping around, dive bombing us? Nope. It's just sitting here. He's just going to sit the whole time. Like, oh, okay, well, that's a little less exciting. So anyways, it's got a lot going for it, but not quite enough to make it stand out enough to bump it up into the way above tier up here. Moving on, we have Vox Liberatis, our first Chaos one. This one actually, to me, is probably, well, I don't want to give anything away on the future ones, but I like that it mixes Tyranid combatants and Chaos combatants. We get 2 in 1 here, okay? We have a nice progression through sort of grim dark, and then you end up in what feels really like a religious space, ultimately, with the fight against the demon that's chained up, and it has its own set of attacks. It's a little bit unique, and you have to learn those attacks. Meanwhile, you're usually getting pretty sizable waves of Chaos enemies at that point. You have that whole elevator sequence where you actually have snipers in the rafters, and you're managing spawn locations, and I really like that. To me, this one is a great blend of 2 worlds, because we get to start the first half of this whole thing fighting Tyranid enemies, and the second half we're fighting Chaos enemies, and it keeps things interesting, keeps things fresh, and makes it feel like it has actual progression to it. That being said, again, the fight is just not dynamic enough for me to make me feel compelled to put it higher than B tier. But it has a lot of good things going for it, Vox Liberatis does. But for me and my money, in terms of fun factor, it doesn't quite have that oomph to make it feel like it's an A tier operation. Now we move on to Reliquary. Reliquary was, to me and my team, Clearly the most challenging one to beat on lethal. We've done them all on lethal multiple times at this point, but this was the one that presented the biggest challenge, mainly because of the way that the ammo crates are spaced out on lethal mode. So if you've played it on lethal, you know that you get an ammo crate in phase 2, but you don't get a single ammo crate in all of phase 3. You get an ammo crate again in the final phase, phase 4, which is the Helldrake fight. You get a loadout station and an ammo crate there. But other than that, all of phase 3 has no ammo. And I've played a lot of lethal attempts and clears on Reliquary at this point, so maybe there's a small chance that one can spawn there, but we never saw one a single time on lethal. And that made it a genuine challenge, but honestly, it made it more than challenging, it just made it frustrating, right? It was just aggravating. It felt like an artificial way of creating difficulty was to remove that. But even outside of the lethal difficulty, the Helldrake fight itself is extremely boring for a dragon fight. Like, I feel like fighting a dragon is an opportunity to really show your worth as a developer, and I think that it really falls flat for me because all we're doing is playing a matching game and shooting a stationary target. When I think of a dragon encounter, I don't think of stationary. I think of a very dynamic fight. One where I'm probably going to feel like I'm at a disadvantage because I'm grounded and I can't cover a lot of space quickly, but a dragon can. It can swoop, it can dive, it can fly away, it can create space in rapid, short bursts of time. And then it can have big damage windows that are really tiny, where the damage potential is high, but the opportunity is small. That's what I think of when I think of a dragon fight. And to me, this just feels like an extremely subpar dragon fight. Not only that, but a solid 50% of Reliquary feels like you're not going anywhere. And that lack of forward progress can feel monotonous. It can feel frustrating because you have this opening phase. Phase 1 of Reliquary is getting from the starting point to the tomb, right? So you're running through the graveyards. And once you get through the graveyards, you get to phase 2. And that first phase is pretty quick. Phase 2, then, you are in the tombs and you have to, it'll open up a door. And one of the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, is it 5 doors? I think it's 5 potential doors. 2 to the left, 3 to the right. Correct me if I'm wrong. But, and they all have their own sort of unique vibe, but they feel very similar. But anyways, you're there for a really long time because one of the doors opens, you go through the door, you have to search until you find the codes, bring the codes back to the middle room, put the codes in, and then there's this long, awkward, like full 60 seconds of dialogue where you're just standing there at the console like, I need this servo skull to come so we can follow it. And it creates this like awkward, full minute where you feel zero progression. And that's a bad feeling when you have to wait and listen to that much dialogue and not make any progress. Meanwhile, waves can still spawn. So that's an aggravating thing. And then you have to follow the skull around it. You have to stay really close to him. And it's never like, you think of Inferno and phase 2 of Inferno at the Cadian Outpost. You can get lucky and maybe the first body you check has the codes. And you're like, oh, lucked out this time. The servo skull's not like that. In my experience, it never finds the right sarcophagus on its first scan. Normally you have to follow it around to 3 or 4 or 5. Sometimes it does every single potential sarcophagus before it finally finds the correct one, and it drags. So for me, Reliquary is just A, the boss fight's not fun, and B, the phase 2 drags on way too long. So for me, it's going to go down to D tier. Yeah, some people are going to say, I love Reliquary. That's totally fine, right? I got no problems with somebody saying I enjoy it the most. I mean, you like what you like, and there's nothing wrong with that. For me, I don't really get down with Reliquary's whole vibe. Now we move on to Fall of Atreus. This is an interesting one, okay? I don't hate Fall of Atreus. I actually like most of it. So as you're progressing through Fall of Atreus, and you're getting sort of deeper and deeper into the map, and you do a lot of vertical changes, and then obviously you get to follow the Juggernaut, Dreadnought, sorry. Lore people immediately went to the comment section like, crucify him, give us Barabbas. Sorry, Dreadnought. You get to follow the Dreadnought around, and he's super cool, and you get him twice, and you really get to feel his imposing presence. And I like a lot of what it has to offer. It's the finale that kills it for me. The finale can drag on It can be a drag. When you're moving this cart through its tracks, and sometimes it's like, oh, now I have to hit the button 3 times to turn it 3 times just to get it facing the correct direction. It's like, really? You can't just choose which way you want it to spin? Instead of having it spin once counterclockwise, I got to make it spin 3 times clockwise? It's just annoying. It's not a fun mechanic or a mechanic that makes you feel really invested or involved. So everything up until that point I really get down with, but unfortunately I think I got to put it in the C tier, just because the finale is such a buzzkill for me personally. So that brings us to the final 2. Are any of them gonna really feel S tier? That is the question. Here we have Ballistic Engine. Now, this is tough for me, but I think I have a pretty good idea of where I want this one to fall. Ballistic Engine introduces an interesting new variable in the form of a sandstorm that, obviously blocks visibility. It forces teams to really be mindful of their surroundings and try to travel together when visibility is low, especially at the higher tiers of difficulty. And I really generally like the progression of this map. So the first phase is basically moving through the outer areas where the sandstorm is really heavily present, and then you get a sort of break from that pretty quickly where you go indoors. And now you are in this room where you have 3 different main staging areas, A, B, and C, in whatever order they're in. You could get lucky and have it so that raising the rocket up out of the silo can happen with no interruptions, or it could get disrupted and you have to go press buttons. But I really like all of the verticality that's involved in that room. You have this big central pillar and you have to rotate around it. Meanwhile, you could get waves that spawn in these upper echelons and then they drop down. And then you also have like if you're walking into the room, the first section is sub floor level, so it goes down steps, so it's a little bit of a kill box. The back section, if it's A, B, and C, it would be B. That back section is flat and stationary at the same level as you, same tier as you, but it's a little bit more cluttered. And then you have the right staging area, which is elevated. And so you have all this verticality that's involved, and it makes for a lot, what I think is more interesting and dynamic, combat. Then you get to ride the elevator up, and then you're back outdoors. And this outdoors area is my favorite place to get a Terminus enemy. You could get the Neurothrop, you could get the Carnifex, because in this area, you could get one in the first stage too. It's very similar about vibe, but in this stage, when it spawns, you could get a sandstorm as well. And there's something, I know people hate Neurothrops, but fighting a Neurothrop in a sandstorm is, to me, a really fun way to throw down with a Neurothrop, right? It's like, not only am I fighting an enemy that can't be meleeed unless we get it grounded, which is possible, obviously, but not only that, I'm also trying to fight this thing with limited visibility and trying to keep an eye on waves that are coming in, trying to keep an eye on the green balls that come in. All of that is much more exciting to me when you have this other variable that's introduced that shakes things up a bit. And I like having that inclement weather. So for me, and then obviously the finale is really fun. You get to call a train in and run over a bunch of Tyranids. It's really fun to do. So for me, this is actually going to end up, I'll move things over here. For me and my tastes, I put it at the top of A, just above Inferno. I like this one personally more than Inferno. I think this is probably where a lot of folks are going to start to disagree with me. Some people hate inclement weather. They don't like that variable. They might drop this down to B, C, even D. I don't know. But I actually just enjoy this one, generally speaking, more than Inferno. I like the progression of the spaces, this sort of rubber banding of being outdoors with a sandstorm, indoors, outdoors with a sandstorm, indoors. And then the final phase, I really like charging the generators up to keep the train energized and being able to call in trains to run enemies over. Super fun. And that finally brings us to the brand new operation, and this is the one that has the Bio Titan, the Hierophant, and it looks so cool. And I like that during the mission you get eyes on it at different times. So the first time you see it is at the very opening. You have a clear goal in the distance, right? You can see the thing that is your job to take down. And you can see it wiping out, Cadians, and you get this immediate sense of its power and of its scale. And I really like that. And it gives me a clear and immediate goal. And then, we have to sort of make our way around this. If you look in front of you, I mean, this is no man's land. You would be toast if you walked straight out and took it on head on. So we have to wrap around. And we go through, and this is one of the things I really like about this operation, is that there's not one clear and direct path. Okay, there are several paths that you can take. You can go to the far left. You can take one of the middle routes with far right route. There's an underground space that you can go through. There's a hill that goes up and wraps around. There's just a lot of variance in this map, and it gives you the power of choice as a player to say which way do we want to go. You could even have a sniper who's scoping out threats and say there's a big pack of majors on the left. You could say, that sounds fun, let's go take them down. Or you could say, we're on lethal mode, let's try to avoid that if we can. Let's go on the right side where all I see is Minoris enemies. So you make your way up and around. I think that this map, the ammo crates are spaced out in an extremely logical way, probably the best that any operation manages ammo economy. I think they're spaced out the best. I like that we're outdoors with this swampy vibe, and it's a little hazy. It's not like Kadaku on Inferno, but we have this haze that settles in. You can even see it in the picture here, where it looks almost like sepia tone. And then you end up indoors, underground, in these sort of sewer systems, which is a really fun place actually to get ambushed by extremist enemies. I really like when we get like the duo neurothropes, or zoanthropes that spawn in that sewer tunnel. And then you get to move into this really close quarters brawly room, which is the most fun part of this whole operation to me. And when you get a Carnifex that spawns in this room where you have to charge these generators and there's vines that are locking them down, I like that mechanic, but I also like when you get that, you can get a neurothrop, which is a little... I still think it's cool to get a neurothrop in there because it keeps the neurothrop confined a bit. Like a lot of times he just stays around the corner and tries to like snipe you with his green balls. And so you actually feel like we've pinned this thing in, when a lot of maps, the neurothrop just gets to float around in the sky and it has the advantage. This is the only time that the neurothrop really feels contained, and I like that. But especially when you get the Carnifex, because brawling with a Carnifex in this room that has a high ceiling but not a lot of horizontal space to move in can be really fun and dynamic. And then you get to progress past that and you're sort of winding your way up and through this facility. There's lots of big packs of majors that tend to spawn. I like the spiraling sort of staircase that you end up fighting up, and you can get the Carnifex to spawn there too, which is really fun to have this Carnifex on this tight spiral. That is a really fun place to fight the Carnifex. And then you ultimately drop down, you progress out again and into the outdoors where you see the Bio-Titan again, and he comes across the map, he's kicking stuff over, he knocks the head off of a statue, the dust settles, and then there's a pack of majors on the other side of the dust. And so you're like, I really want to go kill that thing, but I gotta deal with these guys first. And then you make your way to the finale. And the finale, to me, I know a lot of people think that it's tedious. I actually really like this finale, okay? Because it forces some interesting choices. You might say, well, you're the bulwark, right? You're not using your gun very much anyways. Why don't you take the targeting module? Or you could say, I'm the heavy, and I know that we're going to go down our big gun for crowd control, but I'm really confident with this thing, so let me pick it up. You know, you have to make those choices on the fly, and then you got to defend that person. And so it really makes this interesting challenge where you feel like you have to deal with a bit of a handicap by taking away your primary weapon option for one of your players. And then the mortar strikes are coming in, and it makes you again be strategic about timing. Do we go and spin this thing, or do we wait for the mortar strike to finish before we go do it? Or do we, because again, it's all about risk and reward. Maybe you're willing to take the risk of getting hit by that mortar strike and getting that targeting gun back in the hands of the guy that's going to use it, because you want to get that done before another wave spawns. And if you wait out the mortar strike, chances are pretty good you're going to get another wave. And you can get extremist spawns multiple times during this final phase too, which makes it even more interesting to me. Like, I feel like I very seldom get extremist enemies to spawn in the finale of Inferno. And so for me, this finale is just, we're taking down something big, and you get that immediacy of seeing the laser turrets pounding it, and it recoils from the shots, and you get that visual feedback that says you're making progress here. I really like that. So for me, this is actually going to be the only one that makes it up here into S tier. Boom. There it is. So Termination is going to be the king for me. And, you know, maybe my tune on that will change after the newness wears off, but I've played this thing a ton. Mainly because in our online community, our private Discord, whenever I'm like hopping back on at night, this is the one people ask. They're like, oh yeah, can you hop on our team, or we want to get a lethal clear of the new one. And so I've played it a ton. It's not like I've barely played this thing. I've played a lot of clears of it already. And it hasn't gotten old to me yet. I just think it's got a great progression to it. It has its own unique vibe, and I really enjoy it quite a bit. So there you go. That is my tier list, but I'm really interested to know how yours would differ from mine. How would you space these out differently than I did? A tier is the only one that has multiple. So, but at the same time, we have 4 out of 7 for me are in A and S tier. So that's a really good thing, right? That's a really good thing to have that many that high. Undoubtedly, you will notice that the Chaos ones for me just end up being lower down. And I think the reason for that is that Chaos to me is just not as fun to fight. And it's not about challenge, right? It's not about, oh, they're harder to fight. It's that they're less interesting to fight, right? Tiered Majors just make a much more enjoyable combat progression for me personally. You know, I see the charged up green sniper thing trailing on me, and I'm like, how many hits can I get in before I dodge last second to avoid that snipe? And then I follow it up with a punch to break the guard of the guy I was already working on, who then put the swords up into space. And then I got another guy who's doing the whip attack, right? And I know, oh, whip attack, that's got a delay. So it's like whip, delay, whip, whip. But if you interrupt on whip 2 after the delay, if you time it right, you can cut off that combo short, get a nice gun strike, work on the first guy again, dodge the sniper around. It's just more fun, right? And you get to feel powerful in those moments. And Chaos enemies, to me, they sometimes just have attacks that take some of that fantasy away and make me just feel more frustrated than anything. You know, the fire at the feet, you guys know what I'm talking about. When the Chaos Majoris enemies, these Marines, you see the yellow pop up, and you're like, oh, I gotta dodge. And you don't even miss a beat. Like, the very second you're in melee combat, and the very second you see that yellow or the orange notification, you're like, I gotta get out of here. And you didn't waste any time. You backed up and you rolled, and you still take damage to he shoots the ground right at his feet as the fire AoE, and it still catches you, even though you did everything right. The second you saw the notification, you tried to leave. There's just not enough time. And that's annoying. It makes you feel somewhat powerless in the moment. You're like, well, I guess I gotta take this hit. So anyways, they're just not as fun to fight, to me personally. It's not about challenge. It's just about how dynamic is the combat loop. And for me, it's just a little bit more basic. You know, melee, shoulder charge, melee, shoulder charge. They teleport away. Run, 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 run. Melee, shoulder. Teleport it again. Let me run. More frustrating than anything else. So anyways, how would you have ordered these differently? Let me know in the comment section below. Thanks so much for watching the video. And if you've watched more than one of my videos and you're enjoying it, first and foremost, thanks. I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. You could have been anywhere. You chose to be here. And if you've been enjoying yourself, maybe consider hitting the subscribe button and sticking around, kicking your shoes off, staying a while. We'd love to see more of you around the channel. And if you're looking for a community to get involved with that's playing the game actively and regularly, I think it was like last night we had like 15 or 16 people all in the chat rooms grinding together. It was a great vibe. So if you're looking for a great active community playing this game, playing lethal, playing ruthless, leveling up together, helping each other out, feel free to check the link in the description or the pinned comment to head on over to our Patreon group. We've had a lot of new members this week, which is great. Welcome to each and every one of you. If you have any issues linking up your Discord and your Patreon account, let me know. But anyways, there's that super cheap $3 tier. That's the one. Click on that. And then that one will sync up your Patreon account to the Discord, assuming you have those accounts linked in your settings. And then that'll give you access to our private rooms for Space Marine 2. And you can get in there, LFG, be in the general chat, talk about lore, talk about the new stuff that's coming out, or get involved in fire teams that are grouping up in the voice chats as well. We'd love to see you there. Introduce yourself and say hello. And with that, I say, be warm and well fed, my friends. Courage and honor. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.